share our new housing toolkit. Um, Along with me this evening, we have Michaela Jordan, who's a senior planner here at SMPDC, and Malia Cordero, who's our planner and GIS specialist. And we want to note that this is being recorded. So if people in your community missed it, or you would like to rewatch it and see the slides, it will be posted on our website at a future date. So thanks again for attending, and I think we'll get started. So a quick agenda or overview of the evening. We're going to spend around 10 minutes talking about the joint land use study. And then we're going to move into a general overview of the housing toolkit for 5 minutes. And then we'll spend most of the time going through the different housing tools and case studies that we have. And then at the end, we'll have about around 30 minutes for Q&A and wrap up the workshop. Please do type in your questions in the chat as you think of them. We will get to them at the end, just so you don't forget them when we get to the end. And also we'll allow folks to ask questions via their mics at the end as well. So either type in your questions or speak into your computer at the end of the workshop. We'd also like to thank our participating planners from Dover, New Hampshire, Scarborough, and Kittery. As you'll see further along in the slideshow, they provided some really good video answers to some questions and prompts that we have about each tool. So we think it really adds to the slideshow and the toolkit. So we just wanted to thank them for their participation. And I think Michaela is going to take us through the joint land use study overview.
Thanks, Jamel. So JLUS, or Joint Land Use Study, is an ongoing collaborative initiative between the Town of Kittery, the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, SMPDC, and many other local, state, regional, and federal partners. It's the reason why we're here today. It's funding this housing work. The study has been ongoing since 2018 in different phases, and it identifies opportunities for compatible community growth, housing development, transportation connections, environmental resilience, and economic resilience, all while supporting the shipyard's military mission. In this phase of JLUS, we're producing 6 reports, as well as the 2 housing workshops. So you may have participated in our one in May and today's housing workshop, as well as a few other exercises around environmental resilience. So we are currently in our 4th phase of this JLUS effort, and the planning award for this effort is around $1 million. So it's really enabled a lot of great work in the region, and we're grateful to have it here supporting this housing effort. Next slide. So some of the goals of JLUS are to strengthen coordination between civilian and military entities and between the land uses and making sure they're connected, to promote housing opportunities near key employment centers like the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, to support infrastructure, transportation, and workforce needs, including housing, and encourage sustainable long-term regional planning. Part of the JLUS efforts have included some great work on housing. In the past, we've held a panel with the Urban Land Use Institute. We're currently coordinating and working with 2 regional planning organizations in New Hampshire, Stratford and Rockingham Regional Planning Commissions. And they've been doing great ordinance update work in their communities around housing tools as well. We've completed a housing needs assessment that laid out a picture of the state of housing in our region, and in terms of both affordability and availability. And in this round of JLUS, we've been able to develop the housing toolkit, which is why you're all here today and what we'll be going over in the rest of the slides. And I'll just note that because of the J-Luce housing work, both Kittery and SMPDC have been able to use funds from other sources, including the state of Maine, to continue that housing work through other grant programs. And so we just wanted to note that we're really connecting all of these different opportunities, regardless of the funding source, and making sure that this housing work is coordinated, as we know it's important to the communities in our region.
All right, thanks, Michaela. So next we'll do a quick overview of the housing toolkit, and then we'll do a deeper dive into each of the tools. So in our toolkit, we have 4 different tools that are designed to help municipalities and towns expand their housing choices. So the tools that we have put together are the fractionalized units, transfer of development rights, the in lieu density bonus program, and then the varied unit subdivisions, which is something that our very own Michaela came up with and is excited to share more with you. For each of the tools, we have put together a development scenario, some model-oriented language, different questions to consider while involved in the planning process, some benefits and planning considerations, and then implementation steps for each of the tools. The tools are designed to be adaptable for Maine and New Hampshire municipalities. Each of them have different customizable components, so that way you can tweak it to be best fitting for your town or your size community. And then to view the full toolkit, which is only 11 pages, it's on our housing planning website, which the link is here below, and it'll also be included in the follow-up slides.
Thanks, Malia and Michaela. So we're going to jump into the first of the 4 tools. The first one in the toolkit is fractionalized units for density purposes. And this includes basically smaller units or homes, such as 1 or 2 bedroom, can count as fractions of a dwelling unit when calculating density as required by the zoning ordinance. So an example on the screen here is that a 1 bedroom could count as half a unit, a 2 bedroom could count as 2/3 of a unit, and a 3 bedroom could count as 1 unit based on the community's desires for housing. So this really allows for developers to include more compact, affordable homes without exceeding existing density allowances. And the underlined portion of this slide is customizable for your community. So if the half a unit for 1 bedroom doesn't work for you, you can change it to a different fraction. But the idea is that the smaller units count for less than 1 unit when calculating density. So in this chart or matrix, we've put in the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom units, counting as half a unit, 2/3 of a unit, and 1 unit. And another thing we'd like to note as well is that in a municipality, a lot of them put maximum square footage allowances for each unit. So a 1 bedroom could be 800 square feet max, 2 bedroom could be 1,200 square foot max, to count for those fractionalized units when calculating density. In the second column, you'll see if there's a 20 unit cap on a specific parcel or project area with a half a unit for the 1 bedrooms, you could actually allow for 40 units to be built on the same place, whereas your current zoning may allow just 20 units without utilizing fractionalized units. The other columns include information about approximate monthly rent for the different housing types, some annual income needed to afford those rents, and just some example occupations that we came up with that may be suitable for each of the housing types. Next slide, please. Some benefits and considerations here. Generally speaking, the fractionalized units does encourage growth in village and dense areas in town by utilizing land more efficiently, reducing sprawl and costs of municipal services. It does promote renter and owner affordability as well by encouraging compact, lower cost unit types such as 1 and 2 bedrooms, like we said before. And it supports a diversity of household types in addition to just household families that generally can afford larger homes. Things to consider when implementing this tool is that these are generally, this work is generally suited for walkable areas serviced by public utilities for the dense development that it can create. And planners and planning board members can address concerns with increased density in your community, with clear design standards or guidelines, potentially with illustrations to help show developers and folks like what you want the buildings to look like. And also a transparent public communication engagement process as you're working through the adoption process for the ordinance change. So now, Autumn Spear, who's the planning director in Scarborough, just to the north of us, is going to take us through their program and utilizing some prompts that we provided them to help share their experiences with fractionalized units.
The Town of Scarborough zoning ordinance was updated in 2007 to include a provision allowing for fractionalized units. This update came as a direct result of the 2006 Comprehensive Plan recommendations. Scarborough's program is structured in a way that allows for units to be fractionalized based on the number of bedrooms they include. For instance, if a zoning district allows up to 5 units per acre, that would translate to 10 one-bedroom units, 8 two-bedroom units, or 5 three-bedroom units. The program is allowed in all of our growth area zoning districts, and it excludes our typical single-family districts. Scarborough's density factor provisions have been used extensively. I will add, though, that our base density is typically around 4 to 5 units per acre, so the density factors are really the only way to allow more standard multifamily apartments to develop. Most, if not all, of the apartments built in the last 15 years have taken advantage of the density factor calculations, as well as many of our townhome projects. The ordinance is fairly simple to administer and well understood. We do have square footage requirements that can be limiting for some developers. For instance, the one-bedroom unit can only go up to 750 square feet, and a two-bedroom unit cannot exceed 1,200 square feet. This comes up more as an issue when the factors are being used for duplexes or townhomes rather than apartments. At this time, I do not believe we will be amending or extending density factor allowances to other zoning districts. Jocelyn Place is an affordable senior housing project that completed in 2024. They were able to construct 60 one-bedroom units rather than 28 by taking advantage of the density factors and an affordable bonus that the town had in place at the time.
So this development here is Jocelyn Place, the one that Autumn was mentioning in her videos. And again, this project was only able to be constructed utilizing the fractionalized units for density purposes. So we just wanted to share an example project in a neighboring community that it's been successful and it has resulted in additional homes being built in the community. So I think at this point, we will pass it along to Michaela to walk us through the next tool.
Thanks, Jamel. So I'll talk about transfer of development rights, or TDR. This is a market-based tool. It allows landowners in what we call sending areas to sell their development rights to developers who can use them in growth areas, or what we call receiving areas. It ends up protecting farmland, forests, open space, and other priority conservation areas, while at the same time directing growth through compact walkable village centers. So you'll see here in a typical development process, we have a farmer, they want to retire, and so they're not having an income from their farm anymore. And so what they typically do is sell off parcels of their land, and those parcels are developed into single-family residential homes, and that farmland slowly gets eaten away until there's no farmland left. When you have a TDR program, that's not what happens. So when we typically think of property rights, we might think of that as one right, but really property rights are a whole bundle of different rights. One of those is the right to develop or to do something with your property. So in the case of TDR, next slide, the farmer will sell their development right, but retain their ownership right, as well as some other rights. And so I really want you to picture, this is the sending areas are the conserved areas that are typically our rural zones, our agricultural and forestry zones, conservation districts, areas that are maybe culturally important to the community that you want to preserve the look and feel in those areas. And then our receiving areas, they might not look so dense like in this graphic here, right? They might be, a typical New England village center where you have one main street with a few four-story buildings. And that might be your receiving area where, it's your village center, it's your growth area, or your downtown. So they can really be scaled to fit your community. But when the TDR process is used, the farmer sells their development right, and either the town can buy it as an intermediary or it can be purchased directly from a developer. When they sell their development right, that land becomes permanently conserved. It can never be developed again. The farmer makes the money off of selling their development right. And so they also retain their land ownership at the same time. So they continue living on their land. They can farm it, not farm it, but they just can't build anything else additional onto the land. At the same time, the developer can buy either directly from the seller or from the town. And when they buy those development rights, they get to add extra units where growth is wanted. So, and this graphic, it's the blue units are the extra units that they wouldn't have been able to build without buying those extra development rights. Next slide. So to put this scenario in words, say you have a 20-acre farm in a zone that allows 1 unit for every 2 acres. If there's a TDR program, that farm owner could apply to the TDR program and get 10 development right certificates because a 20-acre farm would allow 10 units if it's 1 unit per 2 acres. So they sell those development rights certificates to the town or to the developer directly. Now, say a developer comes along and they want to build on a 5-acre parcel that is in a growth area, but it's zoned for 4 units per acre. They'd be allowed to build 20 units according to the zone. If they purchase those 10 development rights from the TDR program, they could increase the project to build 30 units in that growth area. So the result is that 20 acres are permanently conserved and there's 10 more homes in an area that's already serviced. So it's more cost effective for the town if you develop in the serviced area versus in the rural area. If you think about taking 10 units and having to build a whole new road to service the 10 units, or if you take those 10 units and put them in an area that already has infrastructure services built, it's much more cost effective for the town, and it also helps with permanently conserving those areas that are important to community character. So the benefits are that it encourages growth in town and village centers, places where the community has explicitly stated that they want growth. It also preserves lands that are important for the community to preserve. It reduces the costs. And it's also a financial benefit to the landowner of the farm or forest land or open space land that does not want to develop. They can still make some money without having to sell away all of their land for development. TDR can be more difficult to administer, so that's one of the biggest planning considerations. If you think about doing this program in your community, it relies on knowledge in the community that the program exists. It relies on understanding how the program works. And so you have to do a bit more education and outreach in your community to make this an effective program. and the market has to support uh, this program. It doesn't work in really slow real estate markets. So here we'll hear from Donna Benton. She's the Director of Planning and Community Development in Dover, New Hampshire. Dover is one of the most successful TDR programs in the country, and it's been ongoing for a long time, as you'll hear from Donna.
So the Transfer Development Rights Program in Dover started around 1990, and we've revised it a few times, including 2003 to add in a residential option instead of focusing just on industrial, and then again in 2008, 2010, 2018, and 2021. And we currently even have a TDR subcommittee looking at our ordinance and drafting amendments to propose to the planning board.
And I want to point out that while that might seem intimidating that they revised it so many times, I think it's really great to show that you can try out these different tools, and if something isn't quite working, you can change things to make it work better and better for your community. And I think Dover is a great example of that.
Originally, Dover's Transfer Development Rights Program was focused on industrial uses only, and then we've added in the residential option. So originally the sending and receiving areas were defined by different areas in Dover, and that border was actually the Spalding Turnpike or Route 16, which essentially forms an internal spine kind of halfway through the city and splits the city into two. And so we had a sending area on one side and the receiving area on the other side. So the side with our urban downtown area was the one that was receiving the rights, and then the other side was the one that was getting more of the conservation land and more of that rural land instead. When we added in a purchase option, that became very popular, where you would pay, again, at the will of the planning board, you would pay transfer development right fees. And those fees can come down depending on if the unit is size restricted or HUD restricted. And we did that to try to get an affordability piece to it as well. And then those fees go into the conservation fund to reimburse the city for previous conservation efforts, but also moving forward to continue to take care of our conservation land or gain more conservation land. So since we revitalized the program in 2018, it has been very popular for developers to use. We've been seeing a lot of requests for transfer development rights to add in extra units for different projects. And this is because most of the raw, vacant, easily developable land in Dover has already been taken. So now it takes the focus on infill development and more creativity for development in Dover. So we've been seeing a lot more use of the transfer development rights. And since about 2018, over 62 acres of land have been conserved. So I would say the most significant challenge that we've seen is the public perception. It's often called a pay-to-play program, and people think that the city is just helping out developers. So I think with more public education and outreach and trying to help provide information to kind of show that those are more myths would be helpful. So if you have a program, make sure that you can get ahead of that with public information available. We have quite a few examples to choose from in Dover regarding TDR. If I had to choose one, I would probably highlight the Banner and Sophie Drive, which is off of Bellamy Road in Dover. This is a project, staff thought it was should have been rezoned from R40, which is our most rural type of zoning district for residential uses. In the R40, it means 40,000 square feet minimum lot size. And looking at the surrounding area, we thought it was more like an R20 and should have been about half that lot size requirement. But the planning board at the time didn't want to really lose any of our more rurally zoned land. So TDR was a great option for this site and for this developer. It allowed for a mixture of different home types. It has four unit buildings along with single family buildings. It has a building that looks like a farm, or it has a building that looks like a barn that is really 4 units in it, and it has an affordability piece with some HUD restricted units. It's walking distance to our schools and kind of tucked away, so it's less noticeable. And this is one where the planning board and the developer heard concerns from the abutters and worked with the abutters to try to alleviate those concerns. So all around, I think it's a great example. It was 7.79 acres. It would have yielded 9 units, but instead they were able to get 31. And that again is 13 single family homes, 4 4-unit buildings, and then 8 rental units at the HUD fair market rental restriction.
Okay, I'll pass it along to Jamel to talk about the next tool.
Thanks, Michaela. So now we're going to move into the affordable housing density bonus and in lieu fee structure. So this allows for developers to pay a fee to the town instead of actually constructing affordable units at the site. It's usually paired with density bonuses or other incentives to encourage participation in the community. And generally speaking, the fees go into a dedicated housing fund or trust set up by the town or community that can be used for several things, but typically it supports nonprofit housing projects, helps to acquire land and pay for that for affordable housing projects in the town. Could provide some funding, some gap funding for mixed income or affordable housing projects in the future, and helps to offset permitting or infrastructure costs for affordable housing projects, which are typically really hard to fund in our experience. So for this development scenario, we're going to say that the base zoning is 20 units permitted on the site, and based on the state required 2.5 times density bonus for affordable housing, this would allow for 50 units on this site. So the affordability requirement, which can be customizable again, but in this scenario is 15%, so that would be around 7 units must be affordable to qualify for the bonus. But with the in lieu fee option, the developers may pay $50,000 per required affordable housing unit instead of actually building them on site. And again, the $50,000 fee is a municipal choice. That's just the one we chose for this scenario. So in this matrix, it starts with traditional zoning, no density bonus, nothing different, which would result in 20 market rate units being constructed. With the density bonus option, the second row below, the build affordable units at 15% of the 50, they would construct 43 market rate units and construct 7 affordable units with no contribution via the in lieu fee structure. If you utilize just the density bonus with the in lieu fee option, the developer could construct 50 market rate units and pay while paying $50,000 for each of the required affordable units, which would result and $350,000 being deposited into the town housing trust. Finally, the mixed option, build some, pay for some, which is often used, would be 45 market rate units get constructed, 5 units are constructed as well, and $100,000 is paid into the trust to pay for 2 of the 7 affordable units. Obviously, this works different on the ground and community by community, but this was the easiest or most simple way that we could describe it in table format. Next slide, please. So there are different methods for determining the in lieu fee amount. We're planners, we're not market experts, so bear with us. But basically, it's based on the affordability gap, how much rent is lost between a market rate and affordable rate unit, production cost of constructing these units, and basically based on project-specific characteristics such as size, location, sewer connection fees, water connection fees, etc., based on the community. So it's market-based, and it could change over time because the housing market has changed significantly in the last 5 to 10 years. So if the fee is too low, developers are more likely to pay the fee instead of actually constructing affordable units, typically reducing on-site affordability. However, if the fee is too high, it may result in projects becoming unviable financially, slowing or stopping housing and development, undermining affordability and supply goals in the community. So ultimately, the goal is balance. Like, how much is the correct fee? Like, what is the correct amount that encourages the use or encourages construction of affordable units, but not so high it deters development altogether. So in the example that we provided, $50,000, we've seen that in several communities that has worked well. But maybe in your community you start with 20,000 for the in lieu fee, or maybe at 100,000. It really depends on your local market and what will work for you. Some benefits is that it obviously provides some additional flexibility for developers, and it helps to increase the supply of affordable housing. It does incentivize private developers to contribute to affordable housing goals set by the town, and it generates funds to help support future affordable housing projects. Things to consider if you would like to adopt this in your community is that it does require some local oversight from town staff or the planning board, depending on your community. It could result in fewer on-site units and less mixed income development, depending on the fee structure. And it could face some neighborhood resistance because of perceived density or pay to play, as Donna said in Dover. So really, again, it comes down to public education involving the community when you're trying to adopt these innovative tools, just to talk about how they work, what the goals are, and the benefits of them. So Kittery has this in lieu fee structure program in place. So we asked Jason Garnham, the Director of Planning and Development, to take us through their program for us this evening.
Hi, I'm Jason Garnham, Director of Planning and Development for the Town of Kittery. Kittery adopted affordable housing regulations back in 2020. Well, those regulations can be a little bit confusing, but by and large, they require developers of larger projects to provide deed-restricted affordable units as part of their projects. Developers of smaller projects, say less than 10 units, are allowed to pay fees in lieu of providing units. Fees collected through this program go toward an affordable housing fund, which is partly controlled by a housing committee that ideally will use them to leverage other affordable housing projects by nonprofit organizations or other town partners. Since adopting the affordable housing regulations, the town has seen 3 applicable projects go through the approvals process and into construction. One is a mixed-use project located in Kittery Foreside, where the developer chose to provide 2 deed-restricted affordable units. That project is currently under construction. The town planning board has also approved 2 subdivisions that are both under construction, where the owners have elected to provide fees in lieu of providing affordable units in the project. It does put an extra burden on existing town staff. There were no additional resources put in place to help administer this program, and it requires time both on the front end of project review, where we're informing developers of their obligations, but then more importantly is the oversight. And whereas most projects get their certificate of occupancy and we rarely to never work with them again, this introduces a whole new long-term relationship between town staff and the property owners. Since the town hasn't seen a lot of affordable units built yet because of its affordable housing regulations, I'm going to tell you about a couple things the town, through its housing committee, has been doing with the affordable housing funds that have been made available. The first is an ADU grant program that has provided homeowners with either $50,000 or $75,000 to build and record deed restrictions on a new ADU built on their property. So far, that program has resulted in 2 units constructed and completed and made available as affordable housing, and a third one is on the way. The second thing the town is doing with affordable housing funds is preparing a property that was acquired by the town through tax foreclosure for redevelopment by a nonprofit organization. What we're finding is the costs to do the appraisals and deed research and related work to prepare the property for donation is ultimately a lot cheaper than what a developer would have to spend to build an affordable unit. So in this case, for somewhere up to about $100,000, the town may ultimately see 3 or 4 units built on a property. And these experiences have made us fans of the in lieu fees, where we know they're also more supported by developers. So we're hoping that we can show our stakeholders a couple of big wins of how we can use a little bit of public affordable housing money to leverage bigger projects by working with our partners, which I imagine is a great return on investment when it comes to affordable housing.
I think we're going to turn it to Michaela for the last tool.
Thanks, Jamel. So the last tool is varied unit subdivisions, which is a subdivision that allows or requires a mix of housing types, whether it's single family homes and duplexes, townhomes and small apartments. Doesn't matter what the exact mix of different types is, just that they're occurring within one development. The goal here is to expand housing choices and improve affordability while keeping kind of the look and feel that folks are used to. So it's trying to make housing types a little bit more accessible to people who might be more wary of multifamily housing. And it's also intended for use mostly with greenfield development, or when, we're looking at totally undeveloped land, and instead of a typical subdivision being built, you can use this tool to build a varied unit subdivision instead. Next slide. So to kind of put this in context, we're going to take a step back and look at what was traditionally built in New England neighborhoods. So historically, the market produced, little village centers where there was a mixture of housing types naturally, because housing was built more slowly over a longer period of time. There were different housing styles built. They were mixed in with, churches or community centers, with schools. And we see these historic centers throughout New England, and they occur at all different scales. So the example image here, the aerial image is pretty rural, but we also see, more dense, traditional New England neighborhood style developments as well. Next, please. Today, when we think about neighborhoods being built or subdivisions being built, this is what we see now. The market's producing larger single-family homes, often in what's called a new colonial style. They're often on large lots. The driveways are usually pretty long, often on cul-de-sacs, and they're typically pretty expensive. Next. So if we think about who can afford to live in the typical subdivisions in our current housing market, it's not many of us. Not even all dual income households could afford to purchase one of these single family homes. In a lot of our neighborhoods in our region, homes like these are going for about $500,000. So even attorneys, if it's a single parent household, might not be able to afford living in this neighborhood. Also, when you think about the typical subdivisions that are built, the homes are often 2 stories, maybe 3 stories. So if you have a person with mobility needs, if you're an aging adult and you have concerns about using the stairs as you get older, you might not be able to find a house suitable in a typical subdivision, even if you have the income to afford it. So they're not, they don't match well with the types of households that are in need of homes today. Next. So now this tool, the varied unit subdivision, how is this different? So it's in the title. We're looking at subdivisions that have different spread of unit types. So instead of all single family homes that are all in the same style, the same size, on the same parcel size, we're looking at different types of units on different lot sizes in different styles. And these are to meet the needs of different household types. Next slide. So here are some images of the types of housing units that you could find in a varied unit subdivision. So the top left image has a 3-story apartment complex in the background. It's probably has about 16 units in it. And then on the right are single family homes on pretty small lots. So if you expand this image out to picture a varied unit subdivision, you might see, a few more small lot single family homes, and you might see across from them on the other side of the street some townhomes, and then closer toward us, you might see some larger lot single family homes. So the idea is that they all have the same kind of look and feel of your typical subdivision, but the unit types are different. If we look at this picture of the blue house with the 3 yellow doors, it's actually 3 studio apartments. So normally, if you think of studio apartments or small apartments, you probably think of a really large apartment complex in a city that just stacks a ton of small units on top of each other. But really, this kind of unit type is accessible for small towns in our region, where instead of having a subdivision full of large houses only, you could have a couple house-looking structures that are actually, 3 or 4 or 5 studio apartments. And so that would be more affordable to folks in your community who are looking for housing options. Next slide. So here we'll look at some aerial imagery of mixed unit or varied unit subdivisions. So in the top right, you'll see closer to the main road are 5 square apartment buildings that have 8 to 12 units in them. And then in the looping road on the back of it are single family homes. And you can see all of that forest land surrounding this development. So if you think about those apartment units as, instead of 12 small units in that one building, 12 single family homes, and expand those out, all of that forest land would be covered. So that's another benefit of these varied unit subdivisions, is that by having a little bit more density in part of the subdivision, you're able to conserve a lot more land in other parts of the subdivision. If you look at the aerial imagery on the bottom left, this one's designed a little bit differently, but the outside streets have 8-unit apartment buildings, and then the inside streets are single-family homes, except for on the intersections and the corners of streets, and those are where some duplexes and townhomes are. So again, a mix of units. If you look at a street view, it's like these 2 images you see here, where the buildings look like single-family homes, but they're actually a mixture of different unit types within that style. Next. So this slide's really just emphasizing that if you provide different housing types within a development, then you can have different households within that development. So if you provide different housing types that are at different affordability levels, different folks can live there. Next. So in a development scenario, we might see a 1-unit per acre subdivision built. Generally, those are going to be pretty large homes between 2,500 and 3,000 square feet. In some of our towns, those are going to sell easily for 600,000 a piece. Some might be a little bit less, some might be even more. To purchase a $600,000 home, you need an annual income of 200,000. An example occupation for that is a surgeon, a CEO, a tech director, or a dual income household of engineers, financial advisors, pharmacists. So these are high income earners that could afford living in this kind of subdivision. If you take that same development area and do a varied unit subdivision, it might just be a slightly more dense subdivision, say 2 units per acre, but fewer acres are actually disturbed, meaning more is conserved within the development. If you produce a mixture of quadplexes, townhomes, and single-family homes, you are making that accessible down to folks making about 70,000 a year. So that would include municipal staff, small business owners, nurses, and teachers. So if you provide the different types of units, again, different households can live there. Next. So the way this works in ordinance is a bit more complicated. There's a lot to customize here. So on the left, we have the housing types groups. So this is where you as a community would decide how you want to incentivize, what you want to incentivize in your community. So you could make, as in this example, 6 different housing type groups. You could make more, you could make 10, you could make fewer. I wouldn't make more than about 6 because it gets more cumbersome to understand and to implement. But you basically assign types of housing to different groups. Right here, it's organized from lower density to higher density. And then on the right, you calculate and create your density bonuses and what qualifies for those density bonuses. So we recommend doing the scaling of density bonuses. So the more variety of housing types you provide, the greater density bonus you receive. And this is to really encourage the variety of housing, but it's also to enable at least a little bit of variety if there's a development that, it's more suitable for, just the, say, detached single family townhomes and cottage cluster single family homes, but it's not maybe suitable for more dense development. So you could use those 3 types and earn the lowest of the density bonuses. But you have to determine for each one what your density bonus rate is and then what qualifies. So in this example, to qualify for the first density bonus, which is 2 times your base units, you would have to provide housing from any 3 of the groups, and the highest density housing group that you include must make up at least 30% of the total units. And that kind of provision is important so someone doesn't provide 1 cottage cluster and then 1 townhome and, 11 single family homes, but they qualified for the density bonus because that's not in keeping with the spirit of what this is trying to achieve. For the second density bonus level, you'd have to provide any 4 groups and then 20% for the highest and the second highest density groups, and then it increases there for the third density bonus. You could also use you could use income levels instead of housing types to categorize your groups and to assign the density bonuses. So you could do low income, moderate income, median income, and then and higher income or something like that if you wanted to. Next. The benefits are that it mixes home types, which inherently supports aging in place, it supports intergenerational living, and it supports social connection. It also promotes renter and owner affordability by encouraging different types of units and more compact units in areas that would otherwise be the same unit, the same single family house throughout the development. Considerations around this one are mostly around public perception. So using visual examples showing cost comparisons and open space use comparisons can be helpful for addressing those concerns. And then you also have to consider how this tool would pair with your subsidized affordable units density bonus and ordinance because that's separate. Like this is targeting um, like naturally affordable or workforce options. And so you'd have to consider how that works with your state mandated the LD 2003 and LD 1829 2.5 times density bonus for the income restricted units piece.
So next we'll talk a bit about how to implement these tools. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was what are some common drivers of ordinance updates? What are some things that might trigger the planning board or the public to consider looking at the ordinance and making some changes? So the first one of those would be a comprehensive plan update. And the goals, policies, or strategy section of your plan, you might be recommending or requiring zoning or ordinance updates. Another thing that might set off ordinance changes is if the select board or the select council makes a direct request. You might also receive a request from your planning board or planning board members. Then with state legislation changing, there might be newer revised laws that require updates on your local ordinances. And then lastly, you might receive a citizens initiative through something like a public petition or a proposal. And there, of course, we wanted to make a caveat that there might be other things that are specific to your local community. So how do we amend the local ordinances? The implementation timelines and the procedures will vary based on your government type and your community-specific charter. You may also request additional planning support through your regional planning organization. So for the Southern Maine towns, that would be us. And always consult your legal local requirements. So for the 4 tools, there are some different nuances between the 4 tools and how to implement them, but they all generally follow a similar process. For the further details, you can refer to the full printout of the toolkit, but for now, we'll just go over the overall general process. The first step would be the initial review. So that's when your planning board or your town staff would be looking at the ordinance and the section that's targeted for any changes. The next step would be to draft those changes. Either the planning board would be drafting those, the staff would be, or you could work with, again, like your regional commission to draft those changes directly. Next, you'll want to engage in public and stakeholder engagement. So that could be through public workshops, informational meetings, targeted stakeholder sessions, and that's so just to make sure that you have the public involved in that planning process. Next, you'll go through the official review process, where you have to make sure that the zoning ordinance aligns with the state statute. Then you'll go through adopting, whether that's by vote, a town warrant vote, a select board vote, or city council vote. That's something that'll vary based on your town. And then once it is adopted, then you'll need to go through, update the language, update your zoning map if applicable, and make sure that your zoning ordinance, subdivision, et cetera, all reflects the change. And then you might need to also consider what administrative needs there might be for tracking or permitting in addition to your ongoing workflow. And I will pass it to Jamel for our Q&A section.
Thanks, Malia. So we've been through 4 tools. There's been a lot of information in a quick amount of short amount of time. Sorry. So we'd like to hear from you all. If there are any questions or comments on these tools, are they usable? Do you think you could implement them in your community? Anything or any questions you have for us? We have set aside until 5:30 for this webinar, so we're here to discuss and chat and answer any questions. So there is a Q&A in the app that you can use, and we've received some of those, so we can go to those soon. But if anybody would like to either raise their hand or speak, we'd be happy to chat with you. So I think Malia is running the controls, so if she can allow folks to talk who would like to, that'd be great. Do you see anybody, Malia?
Jumping to the chat here to see if we have any questions there. I don't have anyone with their hands raised, though. Oh, we've got a hand raised. Thanks, Jen. We should have it set up so you're able to chime in now. It looks like you're on mute though.
She appears to have unmuted herself. Can you hear us, Jen? I think she must be having issues.
Yeah, you're also welcome to type your comments or questions into the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll catch you there.
If nobody else has their hand up, we could jump over to the Q&A, question and answer part of the webinar while we let Jen figure out her mic. So I'll just read the first one. It says, unfortunately, it's anonymous attendee. Unfortunately, I really have trouble believing developers who say it doesn't pencil out to include affordable units, especially when I see sprawling apartment complexes with dog parks, car washes, and pools. How can we account for this as planners? I realize New Hampshire doesn't allow mandatory inclusionary zoning, which complicates things. Unsure what Maine does. Well, it's great to see folks from across the border attending. It seems like a New Hampshire attendee. So I'll try and answer this. I will say that as planners, it's pretty difficult for us, or at least for me, to fully understand like what projects do pencil out financially. But in my experience working for different towns, it does seem challenging to fund affordable projects, especially ones that are not phased. So for instance, a lot of the projects that a developer such as Avesta does are usually phased out over the course of 4 to 5 years to completion to allow for those annual tax credits to jump in and help fund those. So I think that the affordable housing in lieu fee structure, varied unit subdivision, those tools can help those projects pencil out. And that's kind of the idea, is to provide flexibility and tools to allow for those types of developments to be constructed in communities. And Maine does not have inclusionary zoning requirements as well, but we do have that state required affordable housing density bonus that was triggered by LD 2003. I don't know if anybody else has other things to add.
Yeah, I'll just add something we include in the toolkit model ordinance language for the varied unit subdivision that gets at a piece of this question is defining in your ordinance what a luxury unit is, and then requiring as part of the varied unit subdivision that not more than a certain percentage of units in that subdivision are luxury units. So that would prevent, apartment units from being included in a varied unit subdivision ordinance to get the bonus, but then ending up being luxury units that only the same kinds of people who could afford the single family homes could afford anyways. So being able to, I think, define not just affordable or workforce, but also luxury, and kind of signaling to the developers from the get-go with some of these tools about what you're looking for with a development, I think can be helpful as well.
Go ahead, Malia.
I was just going to say that it looks like our question from Jen came through. I'll go ahead and read it off. It says, currently our town does not have a comprehensive plan. We have a couple projects with multifamily units proposed. We do not have town water or sewer. Are we required to approve projects such as these?
I guess I'll try to answer that. I guess from our desks, it's hard for us to know if you're required to approve the projects, because we we don't know your specific standards and your site plan review or subdivision ordinance. But usually the comprehensive plan really does help guide development and policy for the community. So we would suggest perhaps starting to work on a comprehensive plan or master plan to help inform those new policies or ordinances to allow for projects that are not connected to water or sewer.
And I would add too that kind of the benefit of some of these tools is that they don't they aren't for one scale of community. So the varied unit subdivision could be a useful tool even in a very rural small town where you could in your ordinance, instead of, you know, 5 units spread over, say, something really rural, like 20 acres, and they're all single family houses, you could have 10 units over those 20 acres. So it's still 1 unit for every 2 acres, which is quite spread out. But instead of all being single family homes, you have some single family homes, some duplexes, and some townhomes. So the scale can really shift depending on the size of community you're working with. So I just want to make sure that that's clear that it's a tool that can be adjusted based on your community size. And also these tools that we're talking about are all optional things to include in your ordinances if housing is a concern in your community. These are not requirements or mandates or anything. It's just housing tools that we as a regional planning organization are sharing with our member communities and other folks to pass along that information.
Thanks, Michaela. It looks like we've got another question in from Ellen and Elliott. Could you elaborate on the additional learning curve / burden placed on administrative staff to implement these various tools?
Want me to take this one? All right. I think generally speaking, some of the tools, such as the varied unit subdivision, in lieu fee structure, fractionalized units, etc., do require a few additional administrative steps from the town staff and or planning board during permit review or site plan review or subdivision review. So those are the learning curve burdens that we were speaking about in terms of calculating density with fractionalized units. It's not 1-to-1 anymore. It's 0.5s and 0.66s or 0.7. So it does add a few extra steps to allow for additional density. And also the in lieu fee structure, you have to set up an affordable housing municipal trust, which has guidelines and committees. So there are different administrative tasks or things that you would have to complete in order to administer these ordinances. But again, we think that they're definitely worth the little bit of extra work to create additional housing in our communities.
And I'll just speak to the TDR program part as well. That one would include creating a mechanism in the town to hold the funds from the development rights transfer. And so that's administrative work because you have to have a place created for those funds to sit, and you have to, be able to track and monitor those funds and then sell them or transfer them to the developer who's purchasing those rights. So there's administrative work there. A lot of it is heavy in the beginning for implementation, but then much easier once it's implemented. For the varied unit subdivision, that one probably has the least amount of administrative burden because it's really just changing the ordinances, and then it just becomes part of how you review a subdivision plan when it goes through the planning board process. It doesn't require a setup of a different fund structure or anything else. So that one's probably the least burdensome administratively.
And then we have Jen wondering if you have to have a comprehensive plan to create or implement these tools, or if you can implement some or any of them without necessarily having that comprehensive plan in place or up to date.
I can take that one. You don't necessarily have to have a comprehensive plan to have um, ordinances. However, I think because these are fairly complicated ordinance tools beyond kind of your standard ordinances, that it would be hard perhaps to get community understanding and buy-in around these tools without a comprehensive plan laying out your community's vision, especially for the TDR program, for example, because you have to be able to define a sending area and a receiving area. And in your comprehensive plan, you identify growth areas and rural areas. So without those areas identified, it would be hard to base um, a sending area and a receiving area for the TDR program.
I'll just add as well that we always encourage our communities to adopt a comprehensive plan to really help guide policy and ordinance language in a community. And that can be updated every 10 years, every 5 years, 15 years. But again, it really helps create a path for your planners and planning board to adopt and implement different desires and pathways to create housing in your community. So we highly recommend it. Anybody else?
If anyone here belongs to a community that had success with a program like one of these tools, we'd love to hear about that as well. Or if your community is currently working on uh, creating one of these tools in your ordinance, we'd also love to hear about that.
I don't see any hands up or any additional chat. So perhaps we should go back to the slideshow and wrap up. Last chance for questions or comments. While you think about asking a question, we just wanted to put up some additional information for you all, and thank you all for attending on this afternoon. We have some links here to each specific ordinance that we referred to today in Scarborough, Kittery, and Dover. There's also some additional resources, one from New Gloucester in Maine, and some of our housing and joint land use study materials on our website. And our contact info is here via email. If you want to get in touch, feel free to reach out. We'll share this slideshow with all the attendees, and we'll put it on our website. So, and for those who signed up and couldn't attend. And we do have another webinar scheduled for October 28th to go over some planning legislation in Maine from LD 1829 and more. So please reach out and register. There's also the website there if you'd like to register on your own. And again, contact us if you have any questions. We do have some more questions coming in the chat, it looks like. Looks like it's just appreciating us for doing this webinar. We just want to thank everybody for attending. I hope you found these tools to be helpful, and the housing toolkit document is actually posted on our website as well, which we'll provide the link later. So Thanks everybody for attending, and we hope to see you all soon. Have a good night. Thank you.